Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing finding the right CDP for your business, exploring CDP attributes and vendor capabilities. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to cover a little bit of housekeeping right now. So just an overview of the hour ahead. We are in the midst of introduction. That will take about 5 minutes, give or take. And then we're going to get into the meat of the matter, the presentation, which will take 35 minutes. At the end of that, we want to leave some time for your questions for both of our presenters. So please, at any point during the webinar, if you have a question, you can use the Q&A module at the bottom left of your browser to ask the question. And you're also going to find colorful widgets at the bottom of your browser, which will have additional resources, including tech support. A little bit about CMSWire. We were founded in 2003. We publish 150 or so articles a month about editorial themes, and we also hold monthly tweet jams, hangouts, and webinars such as this. We cover 3 primary topic areas: digital customer experience, digital workplace, and information management, and we welcome new contributors to the site at all times. About today's sponsor, ARM Treasure Data. ARM Treasure Data's enterprise customer data platform unifies data from multiple sources online, offline, from IoT and device-generated data, and empowers enterprises to disrupt their markets with superior customer experiences. And you can learn more by sticking around for the rest of the webinar or by going to the website there on the slide. Today's presenters, we will be hearing shortly from Tamar Shore. She is the Director of Product Strategy for ARM Treasure Data. And we'll also be hearing first from Brian Carlson. He is a CMSWire contributor and founder of Rock Consulting. I'm Siobhan Fagan. I am very happy to be moderating today's webinar. I'm the Managing Editor of CMSWire. And at this point, I would like to hand it off to Brian.
Well, thanks so much, Siobhan. I really appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. I hope everyone has had a wonderful summer so far, and really welcome to the 4th part of our continuing series on customer data platforms. My name is Brian Carlson. I'm founder and CEO of ROC Consulting, a content marketing and MarTech digital content firm. So I've got 20 years experience in MarTech infrastructure, mostly in the CMS space, but over the last few years, I've been really focused on this exciting new market of CDPs and working with CMSWire on a variety of CDP webinars, articles, and thought leadership pieces. So come check out all the stuff we have on CDPs on CMSWire. There's a real wealth of emerging material on this really interesting market. So, we've already done a bunch of webinars, and really in the first 3 parts of the series on CDPs, we really started with an introduction to CDP, and that gives you an overview of the basics and what a CDP is and can do for you. The next webinar, we talked about how you can get ready for a CDP implementation in your marketing department or your CX department, really by following certain best practices and tips. And in the 3rd part of the series of the webinars, we looked more in-depth at CDP functionality for really challenging enterprise organizations and applications. So I encourage everyone, if you haven't seen the first 3 webinars in the series, please go take a look at those archived ones, get up to speed on CDPs. But we will go through a variety of updates and details here, but there's all sorts of great information there that I encourage you guys to take a look at. So, in this webinar, we really want to update everyone on the changes in the CDP industry. The industry has changed a lot. It is moving at a breakneck pace. So these webinars are intended to keep people up to speed and up to date. And I'm really excited to do that. So there's a lot of really interesting information. And so, but we're going to update everyone on the changes in the CDP industry, but how CDPs have repositioned themselves somewhat, because there has been some repositioning, and also what attributes and vendor capabilities you really should be looking for to find the right CDP for your particular business and application. So hopefully, we're going to go through this, and you're going to be able to find the right CDP for your business with some of this information we're going to be able to provide to you. So first, if you look at the agenda, we're going to start with an introduction. That's going to look at the current state of the CDP industry and where marketers and CX pros are at, and where they're also we're going to talk about what gaps they're hoping with a CDP can fill, in their current strategies and their current MarTech implementations. We're then going to talk about what a CDP can do for your business, really explain briefly the benefits and functionality of CDPs for a variety of applications. Really, that's just kind of giving a good overview so people can understand where CDPs can really help you, okay? And then we're going to talk about the types of attributes you should be looking for in a CDP to ensure successful implementation execution and really develop ROI for your business. And really, that's the goal here, is making sure a CDP improves your relationship with your customers and your ability to message them and deliver information, personalized and customized information to them. And then we're really going to talk about the different capabilities of CDP vendors to help you choose the right CDP for your needs. And finally, we're going to have a Q&A session. And so this is going to be a great time to talk to Tamar and myself and ask in-depth questions about some of the presentation here. So really excited about all that. And that is our agenda for today. So why don't we get started without further ado with our introduction. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the updates in the CDP market. This is all very, very recent information, so this is very up to date. So first thing, the CDP industry continues to expand in the first half of 2019 significantly. It now is $2.4 billion in total funding, right, over the lifetime of the industry, which is only a few years old. So $2.4 billion so far, which is amazing. But in the first half of 2019, we have 19 new CDP vendors, 2,300 new CDP employees, and $317 million in new funding. That is an astounding number. $317 million in funding just in the first half of 2019. So this is an industry growing significantly, right? There is a lot of money, a lot of investment going behind it. This is not a fad. This is something that's a very serious new piece of your MarTech infrastructure and your data management hub that CDPs are really evolving into. But what you're going to see is there's been 71% growth in CDP employment over the last 12 months, which is amazing. You're also going to see that 15 out of 19 of those new vendors are from outside of the U.S. So that's a very interesting data point. So that, a lot of this industry growth is actually coming out of what's called campaign CDPs. We're going to talk later on about that distinction a little bit. But, 15 out of 19 of those vendors, a lot of those come out of campaign CDPs. So these are kind of all-in-one solutions that are much more robust and enterprise-ready than probably more limited CDP implementations, right? So, the growth was really concentrated among firms outside of the U.S. Like I said, 15 of the 19 of those new vendors. So it really does reflect a lot of interest outside of the U.S. in CDPs. There really was mostly a U.S. phenomenon up to this point. That interest is starting to expand outside into non-U.S. vendors. And so what's really interesting about this whole thing is there's a lot of employment growth outside of the U.S. So if you're looking for who's hiring what, non-U.S. vendors are hiring people as they're building their new businesses, but not quite as much hiring in the U.S. as opposed to tons of investment, right? So it makes sense, right? The U.S. CDP industry is a little bit more mature. The vendors are a little more mature, or a lot more mature, right? And they're going to be more focused on funding where, you're going to see more employment growth outside of the U.S. Interesting number that has been confirmed for a few years. There has been predictions that there would be about $1 billion in revenue in 2019. That is true. That has come true. So a lot of these numbers come from the CDP Institute, and they're good numbers. So good stuff to find. So let's move on to the next one. Now this tells us. So there was a survey done in March. This is pretty recent. Really on digital marketers. Marketers in general, CX professionals, really, and what are their challenges, and I think these are important to note all of these because these really tell about what the interest is in CDP. So 63 respondents of these surveys said the inability to assemble unified customer data is their top obstacle to leveraging that data, right? So this is what the CDP is all about. It really is about assembling but a lot of it's about assembling that customer data. It is what people are finding a challenge. It's what people are finding DMPs and other CRMs are not fully broad enough solutions that allow that data to be managed the way a CDP can manage it and assemble unified customer data from multiple sources. So 63 respondents say that's important, and that inability is really impacting their ability to leverage multi-channel data. Companies with the CDP deployed report higher MarTech satisfaction than those without. That's really important, right? I mean, there's a lot of MarTech packages out there. a lot of them are delivering data and information to marketers, and they don't have the time to interpret all this stuff. Marketers are busy. You guys got a lot of things going on. They're running campaigns, they're ensuring things are met and executed on date. So when a CDP comes in-house, marketers and CX pros are seeing results from it. They're seeing that it's giving them the ability to leverage that customer data, and they're getting more satisfaction out of their MarTech stacks overall, because the CDP, once it's connected to the rest of your stack, gives you value, right? It helps you understand customers better. It has you customize things for those unified views of those customers. And so 3, creating that unified view is really the top benefit of CDPs. In fact, 86% of respondents. So that unified customer data, creating a unified view of a single customer with a lot of different data points so that you can understand that person across time and across multiple touch points is really critical. So, all this is really resounding. All the needs of marketers, they're all saying, hey, man, we really need this stuff. And CDPs are the answer, to some of the gaps that are left with DMPs and CRM solutions as well. So now we're going to talk a little bit about just do some overview on what a CDP can do for your business, and really just want you guys to understand exactly the value here. I won't go into a tremendous amount of detail, but at the end of the slide, I want to give Tamar an opportunity to really dig deeper into the whole life cycle here. So just quick overview: data ingestion and integration, right? These are basic functionality out of a CDP. You want to make sure data can come in, it can be ingested into the CDP, it can be integrated together. You want to be able to create that 360 view functionality, such as profile unification and different types of segmentation are going to allow you to combine that information together, segment it out into the right groups, give you a real broad 360 view of your customers, and then the CDP is going to allow you to activate, right? So it can help go out and push out that data, unified profiles out to different MarTech applications like personalization engines, and allow you to activate that data. So these are just the core functionality. But now I'd love to pass it over to Tamar and have Tamar give us a lot more in-depth insight into end-to-end solutions and how a CDP can help manage that whole cycle. Okay, here you go, Tamar. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Excellent presentation. I will dive into details now into the specifics of what the CDP actually does to get you to a point where you have that unified profile of your customers, and then you can activate it across your MarTech. Basically, if we look at it from a single kind of end-to-end solution, what you would expect a CDP to do for you and the capabilities, it is broken down into 3 key chunks, and then there are the specifics. So the first chunk of what you expect the CDP to do for you is to really bring all of your data in across your silos, get it into one place in the system and get it ready to work on. So that includes ingesting the data and then transforming whatever data needs to be transformed into a different format, resolving identities, so actually stitching everything together, and then you get to that unified profile. But obviously it's not enough. What you're trying to do in order to get to that customer 360 view is you're trying to run your own intelligence on the data. This is where there's a lot of focus on machine learning, and the expectation from CDP vendors is that some of the machine learning is out of the box in the solution, where there's specific engines you can use, such as content affinity, predictive scoring, recommendation engines of all sorts, but also the ability to bring your own machine learning intelligence into the platform, run it directly on the CDP. And this is where your intelligence layer is operating on the data, and you get to a point where you have what we call a master profile ready for the marketers to work on. This is where marketers come in and actually begin to explore the data, segment it, and obviously activate it out to the different MarTech and EdTech solutions that they have, both on a continuous kind of periodic manner as well as a real-time personalization capabilities. This is where your entire customer experience is then orchestrated to deliver that experience you're waiting the consumer to experience or the business to experience, and then the loop continues where the behaviors come back in and the CDP continues to absorb more and more data and allow you to refine that customer 360 view. So in a nutshell, from an end-to-end perspective, that's what you would expect the CDP to deliver, and I'll dive into a little more of the details. So to begin with, on the left, when we talk about ingesting the data and transforming the data, a good example of that we've seen, a typical example, is where you have, let's say, a global consumer packaged goods company that we dealt with, And you're looking at masses and masses of data coming from all global locations that this company is working at, the different brands, the different countries, the different products. And in this particular case, we're looking at dozens of countries and hundreds of data sources around the world. And what you're expecting your CDP to be able to do is absorb all of that data and allow it to transform and get it ready in a matter really of weeks. This shouldn't be a long, long engagement. It should be very easy to deploy and move forward beyond that stage. Once you're done with the stage of ingestion and transforming, a highly important element of CDPs today, and all customers keep referring to that capability, is ID resolution, where all of your data that you just brought into the CDP is all keyed off of different identities. If you're bringing in web behaviors, they're keyed off of cookies. If you're bringing in email behaviors, they're keyed off of emails. Mobile behaviors will be keyed off of other identifiers that are more in the mobile world. And so to be really able to look at a customer 360 view, the most important element at this stage is to stitch all of that data into a person and really understand that it's the person that's experiencing that cross-customer experience journey. And a good example that we recently dealt with for ID resolution is a very large global beverage manufacturer and distributor. And if you are in the world of the CPG, consumer packaged goods, you know that direct-to-consumer marketing is key on all of these CPG companies' minds, the ability to maintain direct relationships with consumers. And for this particular beverage company, it was in-the-moment messaging was critical. How do I know that this person is in the moment to buy a particular type of my product, a particular brand, and how do I make sure that I personalize that message right there and then? And if you're able to do that by understanding where the person is in the journey, by stitching all the information together to the person, you can run that personalized messaging at that spot. And basically, this particular customer experienced a 200% uplift in conversion KPIs because of personalized messaging. So once you did that and you brought the data in, you stitched it together, this is where the intelligence layer kicks in, machine learning kicks in. This is where the different engines out of the box or your own machine learning capabilities begin to run on the data and provide a more intelligent representation of your customer. It's important for targeting purposes primarily. It's also important for analytics. And a good example of that is a recent auto company that we served. A massive, massive company, billions of dollars in revenue. And as typical for retailers and specifically for the auto industry, there's a big online, offline situation where the customer journey is long. It spans across digital channels and dealerships and stores. And basically the important thing there is that you are able to properly run your machine learning analysis on your different customer populations so that you can intelligently understand who is trying to buy which brand, which car at any given time. Are they highly likely to buy? Are they not highly likely to buy? And it's important because when then a person steps into a dealership, you want to take that information and allow the dealership to make quick decisions and convert these people more quickly by understanding what they're interested in and how likely they are to buy. In this particular case, we're talking about many, many millions of dollars in uplifting revenue because of a much higher dealership conversion rates due to machine learning run on people's information. The next stage is really you're at the point where your customer 360 is now established, and it's time to actually leverage that for targeting and for activations across the customer experience solutions. At this stage, marketers will step in, explore the data, and segment the data. And a good example there is very often a use case will be around ad spend and return on ad spend. So you want to get your segments right so that you can target the right people and make your ad spending way more efficient. So big, big focus on return on ad spend. Good example here is an entertainment company that we've been serving for quite a few years now, and they are very heavily focused on advertising, both in terms of how they acquire their users as well as how they act as a publisher and generate revenue off of ads. In their case, they have been using machine learning-based models to look at lifetime value prediction for the users they're acquiring And by doing that, they could target better for the next ad campaigns that they were doing to target high lifetime value customers that are predicted to have high lifetime value, as well as measure the campaigns that they've been running based on lifetime value users coming into the system. In their case, you're looking at a 20% uplift in return on ad spend, which is huge. And then moving forward, the final stage is really activation, where you take the right segments that you've built and basically activate them out to anything that would run a campaign or a messaging to your target audience. You could activate across your MarTech, AdTech, and there's also a big focus these days on real-time personalization. An example of that is a consumer electronics company that we're working with, again, very global, very large. They got to a point of maturity in their marketing efforts where they wanted their customer 360 view to be fresh and real time, so to represent interactions the customer has been doing very recently, and then use that in a real-time manner across the customer experience stack, and in particular with customer service. So if somebody would call customer service will be exposed to the data in the CDP that is very recent and fresh. What has that consumer been doing lately? Very, very recently. Were they on the website? And even IoT information coming from the consumer device itself, which would indicate the health of the device and if that particular consumer was maybe experiencing issues right there and then. So real-time personalization was key in this case. At this point, I'll hand over back to you, Brian.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tamar. That was fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about choosing the right CDP attributes for your particular applications and your particular business. So a couple things I just want to talk about. First, in terms of what it means to be a CDP, what types of features and functionality you should be looking for. Some of these are kind of broad, but that's the idea. I want to talk about it in a little bit of a broad strokes, right? So, these things do distinguish a CDP from other types of data management solutions, okay? Like, it's not a CRM tool. It's not a DMP. CRMs really work with, kind of their own data, but they only store for kind of, and then you've got DMPs, and they may only store data for a limited amount of time, and they're used to influence ad networks and things like that, So there's some distinguishing features of a CDP. The first is that it's packaged. Now, not even 6 months, maybe a year ago, you would have heard a CDP as defined as marketer managed. I think the idea of calling it packaged software as opposed to marketer managed is to say, hey, look, it is business users and marketers that manage CDPs. We want them to manage it, but it needs to be packaged software. It's not a custom data lake or data warehouse that was built by your IT department. The fact that it's packaged software, it's going to make it easier to deploy, easier to make changes when they come in. You're going to need corporate IT to come in for setup and for some maintenance, but the reality is most technical resources should be provided by the vendor or even an agency that could be hired by marketing. So while they've stepped away a little bit in terms of the definition of marketer managed, the fact that it's a packaged software, it's being managed by marketers and business people, there needs to be some understanding that it is infrastructure and that IT does need some involvement in it, but given marketers and CX pros the ability to manage the software themselves, to operate it themselves, with easy integration and stuff like that, makes it much more useful for them. So that's important that it's packaged software. It's not some kind of custom-built thing that your IT department did to dump data into a data lake. Although, by the way, some CDPs will have very robust data lake functionality within them, depending on what you choose. Persistency. This is important, right? So a CDP creates a comprehensive view of each customer, right? So it captures that data from multiple systems, links it together related to that same customer, and stores that information, and it tracks behavior over time. So you heard Tamar talk before about, certain businesses having these incredibly long buying cycles. People are doing research. They're interacting with brands offline, online, through all this crazy stuff. You can't have data that's dumps. That data needs to be persistent, right? So CDPs will contain personal identifiers, and it's really going to work, to capture data, make sure that data is persistent, and it keeps all that data indefinitely, right? So That's important. That persistence of data allows you to understand a user over time, whereas opposed to DMP may dump that data quickly. Accessible, right? So the data in that CDP needs to be accessible to other systems, other packages. The CDP is going to restructure data, add values to it, but you want to make it accessible. Being accessible, it needs APIs, right? So look for a CDP that's got good APIs built into it. You do not want to be doing a lot of custom integration work if you can help it, or else you will be working with your IT department a lot, right? So look for robust campaign-style CDPs that have really good API things built in. Most CDPs are going to have some sort of analytic capabilities built into them. Some of them are going to be more focused, have really, really robust visualization tools as well. These analytics are going to help you optimize segments, campaigns, help you model customer journeys for efficiency and efficacy. But like I said, you can even have advanced visualization tools that are going to give you and CX pros really powerful views into that customer journey that you may not get through other things. So, you can get insights, and these types of tools are going to give you insights in ways that pure data is not, right? So CDPs can help to take that raw data that you would look at and just be overwhelmed by, help translate that into some really valuable analytics or visualization that's going to give you actionable insights. It's going to allow you to go make decisions that are going to increase the performance of your campaigns, right? And that's really what this is all about. And then look for data controls, right? So a good, robust CDP is going to have advanced data controls. That's going to give you the ability to control what data is sent to which database or integration point. That's all important so that you're routing the right stuff to the right places. And then industry focus, we're going to talk a little bit about this more in a moment, but basically some CDPs as well as their vendors are really geared towards particular industries. I think Tamara was touching on that a little bit before, but media companies, sports and entertainment, retailers, there are specific features and functionality and vendors and packages that come out of those industries that are really targeted at them. So make sure, as you're looking for the right CDP, make sure you look for someone that really, if you've got a specialized industry and robust applications that you need help with, I think it's important that you are looking for the right package, right, that helps address it. So I'd love to pass it over to Bar right now, and so she could talk a little bit more about some more attributes you should be focused on for your potential CDP package. Here you go, Tamara.
Yes, thank you, Brian. So to add a little more context based on our experience, a lot of the discussions we're having around attributes of a CDP go back to dealing with the data complexity. No two customers are the same for a CDP. Different companies will have different data sources. They could be more modern or less modern, but they will be of a very large variety of data sources that you need to be able to ingest data from. We're looking at, CDPs at our scale, 200 connectors or so. Also, the data models vary tremendously between company and company, and the ability to have a robust framework to transform the data to the format you need inside the platform, inside the CDP is critical, and not having to use external tools like an ETL solution would have you. The data complexity is also very dynamic. So you will walk into a CDP implementation where the data complexity is of a certain sort, and then there's additional data sources that come in and additional transformations that need to be done. So this is not a one-off exercise. It's a repeatable, continuous handling of data, and the expectation is that the capabilities are there in the CDP to handle that complexity. The next one is security and privacy, huge on everybody's mind. Security and privacy are two different things. They're highly related, but they're different. Security will be more around InfoSec, access controls, authentications, dealing with compliance with different regulations. Very high on priority for anybody who's buying a CDP solution, particularly because it contains customer data. And so it's important to take a look at the security framework that the vendor is offering, especially for organizations where you may have different teams across the world, external teams, agencies needing to reach the data, and it's highly complicated to really come up with the right and tight security framework to handle this very precious resource of yours, which is your customer data. And of course, in addition to that, on top of everybody's mind is privacy, GDPR and related privacy laws across the world, and many, many other privacy regulations. We're looking at not just the ability to deal with things like consent and all kinds of, privacy-related frameworks, but also higher priority things like I may be a global company with different locations around the world, and the individual privacy laws in that country may not allow you to take data out. So is there a data center locally so that I can comply with privacy regulations and privacy law? So very extensive list of requirements, important to put an emphasis on that. In addition to that, obviously, the customer experience challenges. At the end of the day, you're looking at what are the marketers trying to do, and there's a huge variety and flavors of what, at the end of the day, the customers will choose to do first. Very large breadth of use cases. And so when you look at the CDP deployment, look at the specific use case you're trying to obtain at the end of the day and make sure the CDP vendor allows you to have a whole product that actually drives that. So examples could be, my key thing is new customer acquisition and is highly related to ad spend and targeting on the ad spend side. Other customers may be more leaning towards retention of existing customers, and so loyalty programs, personalization of messages to existing customers becomes key. Some customers are more online, offline customer journey and the ability to stitch them together. Some customers may look at real-time use cases for marketing, first-time visitors on your website, real-time response by customer service. So it's very important to look at the particular use case you're trying to develop and make sure that the CDP you're choosing really allows you for that end-to-end realization of the value you're after. And obviously, finally, as much as possible, make sure it's a single CDP that provides all that value end-to-end, and you don't have to stitch different solutions together. And back to you, Brian.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tamar. That was great. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about choosing the right CDP vendor. And so I want to update a few stats first and talk a little bit about one of the recent surveys that were done. This was a similar one that I called out before. So let me just talk about the stats real quick because I think they're going to tell an important story. And so as we talk about what the right vendors are and where they're focused, whether you're B2B or B2C and different industries and applications, all that good stuff, I think the primary distinction is between B2B and B2C. 62% of B2C companies have disconnected customer data versus 48% of B2B companies. That makes sense to me. I would think anyone that works with consumers and consumer companies know that. They typically would have more sources of customer data from different places. It's probably more disconnected than maybe a B2B company, which has a little bit more direct management over its data. So they've got more challenges there. B2C companies, though, report higher satisfaction with MarTech than B2B, much higher, 73% versus 55%. That's really significant, right? And remember we talked about MarTech satisfaction increasing with CDPs. So B2C companies are using CDPs and getting more satisfaction from MarTech because they're finding CDPs enhance the value and improve the value of the rest of your MarTech stack. They're able to give that type of important data and information out to the stack and affect that customer experience in very significant ways. So that is a significantly higher satisfaction report with MarTech in general for B2C than B2B. And then B2C companies are 2 times as likely, 41%, to have a CDP deployment underway than B2B. So they're obviously seeing the value of B2C. They understand the value. They're implementing it. They probably have more of a need for it initially. So I think that's a really important note on that. So, look, consumer customers are facing greater technical challenges in general than B2B companies, but they're more successful MarTech users, right? So they've got a higher wall to climb. They've got more challenges. They have more data sources. They have more technical challenges. But when they're doing it, they're more successful than B2B companies when they're implementing them. So, anyway, B2B companies are more likely than consumer companies to cite organizational issues as obstacles to success. So this was actually 42 to 19%. So organizational issues are something that B2B companies are running into. And I worked for a B2B company, and I understand that issue. There can be a lot of resistance across different organizational silos, right, to trying to bring all that kind of stuff together. B2B companies are also more likely to hope that the CDP will reduce their reliance on IT, 42 versus 24%, right, and will empower non-technical users to do segmentation, create predictive models. So this is really interesting. I can tell you, coming from a B2B enterprise, that reliance on IT can be stifling. So when you hear us talk about packaged software, any digital marketer that's worked in a B2B enterprise environment knows that the heavy reliance on IT can have a significant impact on the ability to execute and deliver marketing campaigns, as well as show improvement in marketing performance. So B2B companies are really hoping CDPs are going to help disconnect them a little bit from their reliance on IT a little bit, and that is very understandable. So, when we talk about B2B versus B2C, this is important, right? For all those reasons, when you're looking at a CDP vendor, there are vendors that are all in one. There are vendors that do both B2B and B2C applications. They may be right for you. But if you're in B2B, you're B2C, you're enterprise, and we're going to talk about small business. Tomorrow's going to talk about that in a minute. It's important. I think that distinction is very important. I think for the reasons that you just saw, you want a company that's familiar with consumer applications, that's familiar with consumer businesses, all the different data sources that has experience bringing that stuff together and executing it. And vice versa, if you're B2B, you need to understand, you want a vendor that understands your organization, the complexities of dealing in a B2B enterprise organization, of bringing in data into that organization, of having to work across siloed business lines is a real challenge. I'm working with a centralized IT department as well. So that's important. And industry focus, we talked a little bit about this before, but again, just like CDPs, vendors are focused on industries. Some vendors come out of particular industries. They had experience there. They worked there. They developed a CDP to meet industry-specific applications that they found were challenging as well. I'd love to pass it to Tamar for a few minutes and have her talk a little bit about enterprise or SMB and the differences between real robust enterprise-grade CDPs versus ones that are a little bit more targeted for small businesses. Off to you, Tamar.
Yes, thank you, Brian. And I think the key message is CDPs are really for everybody. Any marketing organization will benefit greatly from a customer 360 view, which is then activated across the different channels to be able really to drive conversions and bump up your revenue. But there's a big difference. And there's a big difference between SMBs and enterprises, and it's important to choose the CDP appropriately. The SMBs will typically have less data sources, less journeys to deal with, probably a relatively smaller population of people they're targeting. They may have a little less of security requirements. They may be focused on a single geography. And so the CDP that they need may be a little more nimble, a little more focused on particular use cases that they're going after, and that would be sufficient and easier for them to deploy. They may also not have a large enough marketing organization to really deal with more advanced use cases. And so it's important to choose a solution that really provides that value for those particular use cases. Whereas when you look at enterprises, they will typically have much larger amounts and types of data. They will usually be spread across many different locations, potentially different countries. Security requirements are usually much higher simply because of the overall value of the company makes it more vulnerable to security threats. And also from a customer experience perspective, their use cases are far and kind of all over the place. So they may start with a couple of use cases, but they do want to select a vendor that can support many different use cases. And so because of this difference in requirements, it's really important to select something that provides you both the immediate value, but then grows with you over time if needed, depending on really the size of the company and the complexity of the marketing efforts that they're driving.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tamar. Appreciate that. And so I just want to talk a little bit about the way vendors and packages are being recategorized a little bit. This is an attempt of the CDP Institute, which is kind of setting a lot of they were the ones who originally defined the term CDP. They're also helping to define some of the standards and practices around the industry so people can all kind of align around common terminology and buckets and things like that. And it all makes sense, in an emerging, developing market, you need to do this stuff. So things are changing, right? And things change all the time. This is pretty new, what we're going to talk about here, and I think it's going to evolve over time. I think it's a nice way to kind of bucket things a little bit, but I think it's in process of development. So Right now, they're kind of talking about CDP vendors and their products in kind of three broad buckets of what they may be. Keep in mind that CDPs are so big right now and are so hot that they really are being used by a lot of companies that may not necessarily be native CDP vendors. There are companies obviously like our sponsor ARM that are native enterprise campaign CDPs that are very broad and robust. But there's companies out there that maybe started in tag management or other places and have redefined themselves as CDPs, and they may not quite have the same robustness of their packages, but depending on your application and need, they may be the right thing for you. So let's just talk about these three distinctions real quick, and we're going to be going on the Q&A soon. So thanks everyone for sticking with us. So really, there are access CDPs. This is kind of like what would be your base definition of a CDP. So access CDPs are systems that gather customer data from source systems, link that data to customer identities, and then store the results in a persistent database that's available to external systems, right? So this is kind of what you heard us talk about before as a base functionality of what a CDP is. And that's really the minimum set of functions required to meet the definition of a CDP, right? And so, they may be more specialized if they're in access, for data management, data access. Like I said, it may be a tag management company or a web analytics system, some sort of legacy business that has now enhanced their product to be more of a data management access CDP, right? And that's kind of like your base system. And then you can have analytics CDPs, right? So these are systems that offer everything an access CDP does, which includes that data assembly, but it also offers analytic applications on top of it as well. So there can be a whole range of different analytics applications. We talked about it a little bit, but, it can include, customer segmentation. You may have different levels of machine learning, predictive modeling, journey mapping as part of all those analytics systems. So, and they can be automated to distribute segment lists out to marketing automation tools or other analytics products as well. So, you got the base CDP, that's this kind of access thing. You've got analytics CDPs that have that base access, data management stuff on top now with robust analytics capabilities that can be anywhere from an analytics to full visualizations and things. And then you've got campaign CDPs. These are, a full, robust CDP system, kind of an all-in-one. So it's going to have data assembly, analytics, as well as customer treatments, right? And those customer treatments are really activation that are going to allow you for personalized messaging, real-time interactions. It could be including product recommendations or special deals for people, obviously supporting outbound marketing campaigns. They're going to orchestrate customer journeys and other stuff like that. So, so really think of the campaign CDP as a full, maybe enterprise grade or full grade CDP that has data management as well as analytics capabilities and all full activation capabilities kind of all built in one. So these things are not written in stone. These are the new definitions of the way a standards body is trying to kind of group CDPs. I think it's good. I think it will grow over time, but I think it's a way to kind of bring all that together, and start to talk about CDPs. So this is kind of the evolution as CDPs start to grow. It's not just CDPs, but these are some of the buckets they kind of fall in now. So, guys, thanks everybody for at the end of this wonderful summer for sticking with us through the presentation. We really appreciate it. We'd love to hear from you tomorrow. Myself, I'm online as well. Love for you guys to follow me on Twitter. I have a website you guys can go check out as well. Love talking about CDPs. If we have questions coming up soon, if you don't get time to ask your questions, or maybe you think of something later, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Talk tomorrow. I'd love to hear from you. We'd love to be able to give people information and continue to discuss CDPs. It's something I'm tremendously interested in. I'm sure tomorrow is as well. So thank you so much to everyone. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to now pass it back to Siobhan for our Q&A section.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Tamar. Thank you both for the presentation. Right now, we want to hear from you. our audience. We would love to hear any questions that you have about CDPs, what you're looking for, what it is that you want, and we will do our best to get to all the questions. We also have some resources that are available in the resource widget on the upper right-hand side of your screen. So if you haven't seen our previous webinars, you can find 2 of them there. And there's also the CDP Buyer's Guide, so just a little bit more information to help you in your purchasing decision. So as I said earlier, use the Q&A module at the bottom left of your browser to ask your questions, and I am going to dive in now. The first question is for you, Tamar. And the question is, why is ID resolution considered such a core capability of CDPs?
Yes, thank you. That's actually a very, very good question. It comes up in almost any discussion that I have with customers. Fundamentally speaking, the purpose of the CDP is to get to a point where you can leverage all of your data or data that you may even bring externally to create a unified customer 360 view. And so what needs to be very clear about this process is that it's one thing to bring the data in to a data platform. But when you bring the data in, every piece of data always has an identity related to it, which represents the person it belongs to. So if somebody was on the website, that information will flow into the CDP and will identify that person with something called a cookie. And if somebody was on a mobile device, that information will go into the CDP with a mobile ad ID. If somebody opened an email, that information will flow into the CDP keyed off of an email address. And so while bringing all that information into the CDP is a critical first step, the next most important question is, can you take that data and associate it with individual people? And to do that, you need to be able to say, well, that cookie and that maid and that email address and that account ID coming from the CRM system and that other cookie because the person was actually coming into the website with a different device, et cetera, all of that data is actually representing a single person. That action is called ID resolution. And without it, there is no customer 360. And so it's a fundamental capability that really should be examined thoroughly when looking into a CDP and the deployment of a CDP.
Great. So next question, you are up now, Brian. I have a question here that asks, how difficult can integrations be when introducing a CDP into your MarTech stack? Can you speak a little bit to that, Brian?
Absolutely, extremely. So I remember working in an enterprise marketing, digital marketing department, for years in a $30 billion global company, and literally we would go month after month when the only IT support we could get was break fix support and implementation and integration support. Sorry. So you can get marred down in this stuff and end up using all your kind of budgeted IT resources and time just doing break fix and custom integrations. You do not want to be spending your IT support time, effort, money, however you get billed for it, on doing integration work. It's a lot of work. You have to customize everything. If you don't find a good CDP that's got high-quality hooks built into it, so high-quality hooks are good APIs that work with a lot of different systems and platforms that are pre-tested, that you can go in then and use your CDP vendor or maybe an outside person to do very easy API integrations automatically or with limited technology involvement. So, an IT department working with the digital marketing department in enterprise can easily get weighed down with integration work, custom integration work with the CDP. That could become a real issue. So I think it can be a big deal. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it can be when that's all you're doing and when you don't have the right framework and proper setup to do the right type of implementation. So make sure you get a good CDP with good APIs so you are not spending all your time and effort on custom integration, because it can happen. Thanks.
Great. So, Brian, I am going to keep you around for the next question. Next question is coming from Jeff, and it is a base access CDP in essence the same as a digital data management platform? And if not, what is the difference? Can you speak about the difference between the two?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there's a couple key differences. One is, as we talked about before, is data persistence, right? A core functionality of a CDP is that it's going to keep data over time so that you're going to be able to look at a unified profile over a period of time on a single customer. A DMP doesn't necessarily have data persistence, and also a DMP tends to be more limited in application, meaning a DMP helps to inform ad networks and work with those types of platforms and systems. CDP is broader, right? So a DMP can be a data source for a CDP pumping in ad network details on individuals, but a CDP is broader. It can bring that stuff in. It doesn't necessarily need to work just with an ad network. It can work across a variety of other sources. So, data persistency, I think, is an important distinguishing thing. A DMP is narrower in application, meaning it's specifically designed to work with ad networks, where a CDP can hoover up a lot of data and doesn't necessarily just interact with the data network, with the ad network. So a DMP is narrower, right? It would be a data source into a CDP, where a CDP is not going to be managed by a DMP, right? So I think those are some of the key things. I wrote an article on CMSWire specifically talking about the difference between CDPs and DMPs. So Jeff, check that article out. It goes into more detail on it. They are different things. There is overlap, just like there's overlap between a DMP and a CDP and a CRM and a CDP. But CDPs are broader, more persistent data, and have more applications than the DMP does. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Brian. So once again, please do send over your questions using the Q&A module at the bottom of your browser. You still have time to ask Tamar or Brian your deep-seated questions about customer data platforms. So Tamar, if I can ask you this next question. This one is about a specific use case. The question is, our key use case is return on ad spend. How do we choose the right CDP?
Yes, excellent question. When we look at return on ad spend, and in general, companies that are spending a lot of their budget on advertising, you typically see two core capabilities that CDPs are required to address in order to see that return on ad spend increase significantly. One of them is obviously targeting. So in order for you to increase your return on ad spend, you want to make sure that you target your ads properly and you truly understand which audience you're going after, so that the efficiency of your ad is better, and you can also personalize the messages in the ad. And in that case, in addition to simply, the core capabilities of a CDP to get to a unified 360 view, et cetera, I think a key one there is machine learning, because this is the point where you apply your intelligence over the data to find those segments of your existing customers that are, let's say, high lifetime value, or the segments you're really going after, and you use them as your basis for your ad spend. So these would be your seed segments to then create new audiences to go after. So machine learning for better targeting to be used as the basis for new audiences you're going after. The second core capability is helping you with measurement and attribution. So in order to see the return on your ad spend improve, what you want to do is you want to look across your ad campaigns, and you want to be able to truly say which one of those are performing better, so you can divert your money to these types of campaigns. And basically at that point in time, traditionally advertisers have been doing sort of like measurements that are more related to clicks and views and are very confined to the ad world. And the more advanced customers today, the more advanced companies today actually try to look into the customer journey beyond the ad click. and really see, can we measure and attribute value way into the customer journey, so that then we can go backwards to the ad campaigns and say which one really was providing the most value, not just the click, but the actual path to journey. And this is where the CDPs that are capable in understanding the full customer journey, stitching the information back to users, and identifying those that actually made the purchase or the expected action well into the customer journey beyond the ad, provide you with the best improvement to the return on ad spend.
That's great. So, Tamar, I'm going to keep you here for another minute because we actually have another use case coming in from a global retailer, and they also want to know what CDP features they should care about the most for their use case.
Okay, so retail in general is an industry that's highly interested in CDPs today. Obviously, all the retailers are experiencing a lot of pressure in becoming more and more online and competing with, the Amazons of the world and these companies. And everybody understands that one of the core elements of success lie in your ability to leverage your data, shorten the journeys, personalize the messages, get a higher return on your ad spend, and drive people to purchase, similarly to the bigger companies and the bigger retailers. So a lot of pressure there, a lot of interest from retailers. I think there's different types of retailers, and it's important to understand your specific flavor, like which retailer are you. So for example, some retailers are trying to really focus on e-commerce only, and so digital capabilities, CDPs that really are able to handle a lot of the digital customer experience elements, the web, the mobile, use of email, et cetera, are more valuable to like e-commerce focused retailers. Some retailers, actually a lot of them, are still very much store brick and mortar in addition to digital. All of the retailers are experiencing this syndrome where in the journey customers switch between digital interactions and physical interactions. So you may be in the store using the mobile app or browsing the web. You may be doing your research and then going to the store just to get an experience of the product and then going back online to purchase. And so journeys are beginning to go back and forth between digital and offline. And so CDPs that can truly handle gathering the data across these online-offline interactions, stitching it together and making it available. So whether the customer is on digital or physical, you'll be able to respond with the right message, are the ones that are truly valuable in these situations. And thirdly, I will say a lot of retailers understand that customer acquisition is expensive, and there's a big focus on loyalty and retention and increasing lifetime value from repeat customers. And again, in that situation, the ability to truly handle use cases such as retention and churn reduction and upsell, cross-sell, retargeting of existing customers using first-party data is critical to these types of retailers.
That's great, and that actually answers another question that another person had about offline and online data. So thank you so much, Tamar. Thank you, Brian. And thanks to you, our audience, for all of your questions. I just want to say that you will be getting the recording of this webinar in your email inbox in the next few business days. Thanks again to Tamar and Brian for your presentations, and to On Treasure Data for sponsoring today's event. And have a great afternoon, everybody. Enjoy the holiday weekend.